Welcome back to the Lords of Lore Podcast Network. This is an episode of Ruminations, where Luka and I ruminate over a book. We do a little review here, spoiler-free and spoiler-friendly, or I don't know, spoiler-full. Yeah, this is a better way to say that. And today, if you've clicked on this video, you no doubt know we were talking about The Bone Shard Daughter by Andrea Stewart.
Oh, you bought it. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, that is just a fantastic cover.
It is so good. So good.
And I think from here on, we should tell people why we chose to read the books we're picking.
Okay, yeah. I mean, you chose this one, so.
Right. And the reason why, speaking of the cover, is because I actually saw the cover to the sequel to this book, The Bone Shard Emperor. I guess that's a little bit of spoilers, but not too much. Again, I saw that first before I even read this. And that's just a gorgeous cover. Mm-hmm. And I think I sent it to you right away, actually. It was like, yo, check this out. And then I was like, so what is this about? And then I got this on Audible, which I'm very glad I did. I love owning physical books and reading physical books, but this Audible experience was something new and fun. And so, yeah, that's how we ended up talking about it. I enjoyed the book so much, I thought we should talk about it on the show. So let's go ahead and get into that spoiler heavy review. Obviously, we've if you're just tuning in right now for the spoiler heavy review, I think we can go ahead and say I think you said 8, right? 8 out of 10 you would give this.
Yes.
I gave it a 9 because I really enjoyed the audiobook. Mm-hmm. But I think this is a fantastic story. Now, this is actually one I recommended. I think thus far, with the exception of Fires of Vengeance, which was you had recommended The Rage of Dragons, which I fell in love with. And then our second review was Fires of Vengeance, so something we were both very interested in. And then we did another one of your recommendations, which was The Sword of Kaigan. And so this is the first one that like I came to you with. I was like, you weren't familiar with, or at least
read it or anything. And you were like, let's do this. And I'm like, let's do it.
Yeah. So I was kind of nervous. I was like, oh, is he going to hate it? Like, oh, it sucked. Well, I'm glad you enjoyed it. So yeah, let's get into it. What are your feelings now that you have no restrictions on speaking about this?
Well, I mean, if you want to just dive into like the main reveal of the book.
Yes.
Like the huge reveal is that Lynn, the Emperor's daughter, is actually a construct.
Yes.
So she is an artificially created being with just unknown number of shards in her that are dictating her free will, essentially.
Yeah.
Honestly, like that, it wasn't. So to me, I thought that was a possibility.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It was during the chapter where I thought that might be possible was when Bayun came to her room and he was like falling up. He was like melting.
Yeah. That's when it clicked. Yeah.
So like, that's when I was like, oh, okay, this is super weird. It was just like, he's sick. The like Emperor takes him away being like, he's sick. Like I'll work on him. And then he just never sees him. And then I was like, oh, okay, wait, like this is.
Yeah.
Like that line where he was like, he's growing people down there. I was like,
yeah.
Oh,
and
shit.
When he mentions the memory machine.
Yeah.
And so, let's talk a little bit about going from the beginning of the book to the end of the book, what your thoughts were, because like you said, like that was the moment for me as well, where I was like, oh no. So reading the book at first, I was like, oh, cool. This is sort of like, Golden Compass meets, like any sort of amnesic or main character suffering from amnesia. Mm-hmm. And then also like, succeeding the tyrannical force and trying to rebuild around that. We've seen those types of stories. And so I was like, oh, cool. Like the world building throughout was incredible. Mm-hmm. So I was in it the whole time. Obviously we have the whole story going with Jovis and you're trying to find out. But for me, it was really like what I thought was tragic irony in that we're also getting the perspective of a character named Sand who has no memory and feels very much in this cycle where she's not truly in control. And in the beginning of the book, she stumbles and hits her something. And what we find out later is a bone shard is actually dislodged, ruining the algorithm inside of her, allowing her to question the routine and the mundane sort of lifestyle her and this village of people around her have taken. So for me, though, reading the book up until that reveal of the bone shard, I was like, oh, clearly sand is a mala, and some sort of force of nature or something that the emperor has created takes away people's memories. For what purpose, I'm not sure, but clearly that's what's happened to Amala, Jovis's wife, that he's looking for. And clearly he's testing Lynn in some sort of way to see, who's better, her or Bayan, who deserves the throne, who can remember more. And that's the sort of test they put them through. That's literally like my whole thing up until that moment with Bayan. And I was like, wait a minute.
Okay.
So I was very like, man, this book does a really good job at that dramatic irony, sort of being like, well, we know the whole time, but the characters don't. And then it flips it on its head. And I was like, what? You mean she's not? And honestly, that was one of the saddest reveals of the book, where Sand sort of acknowledges, she doesn't tell the rest of the villagers, but she herself acknowledges that she is a construct, and not a real person, not who her memories are not her own. They all belong to the former empress.
Yes.
Whose name's I can't remember, but yeah, I mean, that was devastating. And then also that our main character, Lynn, is in the same boat. And everybody on the island are failed iterations of Lynn and Bayan. So what was your sort of thought process or your sort of journey with that going through?
I also thought that Sand was Amala pretty early on. I think once when was it, the reveal, when we connected that like the blue sailed boat goes to Mila. Around then it was like, okay, that's when I was thinking, because we only get a couple Sand POV chapters. I think there's only like 4 in the entire book.
Right.
So I thought I thought Sand was Amala, and then I thought that like what I was confused about once we heard about the memory machine, I thought that like my thought process was something like Sand has Lynn's memories.
Oh, okay.
Like I was thinking like Sand somehow has Lynn's memories.
Well, you were far off.
Yeah, I was pretty close actually.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, I think Sand has Lynn's memories, and like the Emperor is trying to like somehow, whatever that memory machine is, he's trying to get them back to Lynn. But then when we had the Bayan reveal, I was like, okay, no, this is completely different. What I think was so effective was like, you could have maybe theorized that they're constructs, because like there's the whole like the spy construct was like the most complex construct he had in his like arsenal,
right?
But he's been working on some kind of experiments all this time super secretively, so like you could almost be like, oh, like that's like a theory. But then when it's like the reveal being that she's actually a construct version of his deceased wife, which is like, oh my god, that's horrifying. And that Bayan is a construct version of himself,
right?
Which is like an interesting sort of mirroring of his own relationship with the Empress. Like there's like the scenes where there's almost like an affectionate, intimate relationship between Lynn and Bayan.
Right. Yeah. And
as they're slowly building.
It's sort of like random, because up until that, the relationship is very tense and super hostile. And then there's one little moment where she's like, but she was like drawn to him in a way that she couldn't explain. And then she like sort of pushes it down, like it's not appropriate type of thing. And at first I was like, oh yeah, I could see that. Like, you're living with someone who's not related to you. I'm sure there's some sort of thing that could have happened between them. Plus the nature of their relationship constantly being in competition, to have a break where they're sort of like, oh, you're not so bad. I can see why, they might. And that's literally the only other human being besides her dad she's ever been around. Yeah. In her, recent memory, I guess, besides the servants, which now I'm even like, I never thought of it prior to this right now, but those servants too, like, how do we know they're not constructs as well? Because the Emperor has cut himself off from everybody. Yeah. So could be as well.
It's possible. My feeling is that they're not, just based on like, there's like no real hint of it. And they sort of react like people would react around constructs.
Yeah.
Like they're like afraid, and like,
I think they gossip a lot too. So maybe not. Yeah.
And I don't know that he would like use such valuable constructs to just be servants. Like he could just
Yeah.
use regular soldier constructs or spy constructs or whatever it might be.
I think there's also one reference to it, which is I may be misremembering, but Jovis describes them all as not being exceptionally beautiful, but
Yeah.
being very like handsome, I guess is the
Yeah.
best way like to paraphrase it. And I think that same description Lynn gives herself at one point.
Mm-hmm. Well, even Jovis gives the description of her when he sees her for the first time.
Yeah.
Like unremarkable.
Yes. Yeah.
Woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that description alone, after we get the reveal, I was like, oh, the people that he's choosing are specific. Like he's going for a specific looking person, which is also very fucked up. And I don't know, just the idea of the Emperor like being like resolving to the fact that he can't bring back his wife, so he's doing it in this way, but also like resigning himself also not to be immortal and to put his own memories into something else that'll continue. Like I don't know, I felt like it was a very like roundabout way to achieve immortality. It reminded me of like you know, some people would say like in the past people would name their sons after themselves to like continue their legacy type of thing, like to live on, and sort of just that idea of humans being unable to release themselves from the idea of being immortal in some form or fashion. And I thought this was like the sickest, most uncomfortable way of that same idea.
Yeah, it is also strange, like what we see from Sand's memories is like a genuinely affectionate relationship between the Emperor and his Empress.
Yeah, and that's super well done too, because when she's describing it, you think she's talking about Jovis.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another shade of it, like, oh, it is a Mala for sure. And then it's like, no, it's not at all.
Well, like the scene that I was specifically thinking when she was remembering back to like being in the room with the bone shards, where he was saying like, this is all of the knowledge I have, like I'm going to share it with you, like like when he said like, I like my people say I could have married more, like, or I could have married better, and like that little banter, like it gives a picture of like a very intimate and close relationship, which is like very much opposite of how he acts like when we know him through the book. Like he's very cold and like towards Bayan, he's like pure, like straight up abusive, like he beats him. And like,
yeah, there's a line in the book actually from Falu who says, if I'm not hard on myself, who will be? And when she's saying it, she's more so speaking of her privilege, right?
Yeah.
Because she comes from a privileged lifestyle. If she doesn't place expectations on herself, no one else has the power to.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's sort of going against her father in that way. But I thought that was like an amazing tie-in also to Bayan's relationship with the Emperor, and that it's like he's beating him because he feels like he has the right to. Not only is it his own creation, but he's putting himself into it, his own memories. So it's more so when he beats Bayan, it's his own failures that he's trying to like he's frustrated with himself almost more so than he is with the construct, which obviously is disgusting and terribly abusive. But like, I thought was like a very interesting line in the book that I was like, oh, that's sort of indicative of like everything else that's going on.
Yeah, and I think another great thing about the different viewpoint characters is they all have such overlapping themes. Like the theme of like reconciling your identity is like so central to all the characters in different ways.
Right.
Like you have Lynn first trying to reconcile the fact that she has no memories, trying to be the daughter of the Emperor, then realizing what she actually is and trying to find her identity in like her completely ridiculous, like unknown, like just unimaginable circumstance. You have Jovis, who is like endlessly guilty and disappointed in himself for not being able to save Amala, not being able to find her for 7 years at this point, abandoning his family and his parents, not being able to save his brother, which obviously there was no way he could have, but he's carrying this guilt, and like he's becoming like the hero character,
right,
for a lot of people, and he's like trying to reconcile his own identity
reluctantly and doesn't enjoy being it. Like it's a burden to him.
Yeah.
Even though he knows it's sort of the right thing to do.
Yeah. I thought that was like such an interesting, like reluctant hero, because he's not the type where it's like, technically it's literally thrust upon him to like be the hero. And he knows that it's the right thing to do. And he knows that he doesn't want, like, he's so aware of it. And he's trying to reconcile his own like feelings of low self-worth with being a hero, and trying to like justify or reconcile his own guilt he has towards the people he's failed.
Right.
And then you have Falu, who is also trying to reconcile her own identity as realizing how privileged she's grown up, and realize like trying to understand Runami, who is also trying to like deal with her own identity in like the uprising.
Yeah, like the duality of her character, in that she is in love with Runami, but she's also using her to achieve, the sort of rebellion that she's with the shardless, right?
Yeah, the shardless
few. Yeah. I think that's a very astute point you're bringing up. Everyone in here is sort of struggling with their identity based off the positions they've been put in, that they haven't chosen. They've been put in. Like you say with Jovis, he didn't ask for it. And everything he does, he's doing reluctantly.
Yeah.
Whether it was smuggling, whether it was joining the navigation academy or whatever that's called. And then going on this journey that he takes throughout the book, and ending tithing ceremonies, which also is just a really cool world building thing, that everyone has to give a bone shard. Very, very cool.
Oh, an important thing about bone shard magic being that you need a living person's bone shard to actually use the shard. Like you essentially, what powers the magic is the life force of the person whose shard you're using. And so like they'll slowly, like it'll happen like very gradually. They'll like deteriorate physically and then die well before their time, is how it's like the shard sickness is described.
Yeah. At first it's like not noticeable, and then it's like very quickly. Yeah,
like once it starts happening, it's like a very quick deterioration, and you die like well before you should.
Which is one of the worst parts of the book, is when, so obviously there's the relationship between Nu Min and Lin.
Yes.
He's the blacksmith, and he's forging her keys because she can't remember, but she's finding her own way to succeed and learn more about like her father's trials basically, and who she was beforehand. And he sort of gets brought into this mess and ends up with his whole family being executed. And all sort of the blood is definitely on Lin's hands, and that's how she feels as well. Not to take anything away from the terrible things the Emperor has done and did in that particular instance, but going sort of outside, and like, I love when he reveals, like, I've been watching you this whole time. Like, you're not as smart as you think you are.
Illith tells her, like, he knows, like you think you've been sneaking out of the city, like copying keys, like sneaking around his own palace without him finding out. Like, obviously he knows. Which is,
again, goes back into like her being his creation. Just him, like, just taking notes. Like, oh, isn't that interesting? Like,
and what's so sad about Nu Min's fate and his family's fate, which is like the Emperor's conditions and his tests essentially put Lin in a situation where she had no other choice than to do what she did in the way she did. And then, like, he still executes Nu Min and his whole family for helping her.
Right.
And I mean, it just like just shows how, I mean, obviously he doesn't care about anything other than achieving his goal. Like, everybody is expendable. Everything is expendable. But then it's like, what I'm curious about is, well, the Yolanga.
Yeah.
And so just my theory of what the Yolanga are, or I don't know if it's even a theory, I think it's kind of been shown, is that they are
like Mephi?
No, like Jovis. I think they're the Poyer.
Okay.
Because the reason I connected that was because early on in the book, we hear that the Yolanga had the ability to move waves of water. And like, there's a specific line that says, like, there was, like, each island had like a ruler of the Yolanga, and they were like the sorcerers. And when they battled, they could like destroy entire islands because they like throw waves of water at each other, like walls of water at each other. And there were some that were accurate enough to like control the water in very like minute ways, so they could like not cause mass destruction, but most of them were just like throw a wall of water. it has something to do with Mephi and whatever his species is, because Jovis only has that ability when he's bonded with Mephi.
Right.
I don't know if it has anything to do with his Poyer bloodline. Maybe it doesn't, because of the reveal that the Emperor had a Mephi. Well, I don't remember what Lin names her at the end.
Yeah, I can't remember the name either.
I forgot. It only said like 2 or 3 times.
Right.
So if Lin gains those same powers, then that'll disprove the theory of it being the Poyers. But at the very end, like as Jovis is like using his powers more often, he says many times he suddenly feels all the water in the area. Like,
that's a very good point. Yeah.
And at the very end, when Mephi gets stabbed in the shoulders by that construct with 4 arms, he freezes the rain droplets in the area, like Katara did in that episode. Like he stops the rain. So like he clearly has the ability to control water as well, along with like that thrum in his bones that he talks about, like the huge strength he has. So obviously none of that's like, we don't dive into any of that, but those are the powers that are attributed to the Yolanga.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I didn't think of that. I thought, my guess, is it Yolanga or Alonga? I don't know.
I've been saying Yolanga. It could be Alonga.
When I was initially taking down notes, like just a couple hours ago, I was like the Yamanka, and I was like, no way, that's a different book. But yeah, whichever it is. I thought they were like Mephi's race. And the name of Lin's is Thrana.
Yes, Thrana.
So I thought that's what they were. But then I was also thinking there's the statues in the governor's mansion or whatever it's called, where the eyes opened. So I don't know where I was going with this, but the notes I had down was like, is their control over statues akin to that of bone magic? Like is bone shard magic a step further? Was sort of my speculation, because the way the Emperor describes bone shard magic, I think it's in that scene with Lin, whether it's the scene out in the streets, like in the city, or the one where she's back inside, or maybe it's even with his wife in like Sand's memories, but he's explaining like how the people don't respect him enough, and like, you know, years of peace have made the people forget how bad things were when the Yolanga were like the greatest enemy type of thing. And how bone shard magic was the only thing to defeat them. It's like, yeah, I understand you're sick of tithing ceremonies, but that like when they come back, I'm all you're gonna have, type of thing. And so I was wondering if like, how does bones, like, are they not capable of bone shard magic as well? If they get bone shard magic, what would that look like? Or is it sort of like we learned how to use that against them? But I think I prefer your theory there, in the powers that like I wasn't sure why the Emperor would be keeping Thrana hidden underneath, if not for the powers. Otherwise it's just sort of like a weird coincidence. But I also want to get your ideas or speculation on what sunk Deerhead Island.
Yes, that was, I don't remember. So, okay, that was before Jovis met Mephi.
Yeah, so Mephi's sort of like swimming from the sink.
He saves Mephi after the island sinks. And I think it has to have something to do with Mephi being there.
Right.
Especially as he's found as like an infant, like a tiny creature. So it could have been the birth of Mephi.
Oh, interesting.
Like that was like one of the ideas I had, because there's nothing else that like literally the only, like Jovis even jokes like, oh, maybe the whole island's coming down. Like he bluffs the guards at the tithing festival on Deerhead Island. Like once the quaking starts, because like once he gets through, there's like one quake, then a couple hours later, like another one, and then at the festival it starts like happening, and the island
2,
sinks.
3, 4,
So like I couldn't, like aside from it being like the catalyst of the Yolanga returning, but then the Emperor didn't have like an extreme reaction to hearing that Deerhead Island sunk. So there's nothing to give it away, except the only other thing that was like kind of suspicious, I guess, was the fact that there's a large whetstone mine on Deerhead Island.
Right.
And we find out later that there's another very large deposit of it on the Imperial Island that the Emperor ordered shut down and not used anymore.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
So I think like that might have something, like we know nothing about what whetstone is, or
Whetstone, yeah.
Whetstone,
and we know that Mephi hates being around it.
Yes, and he can produce the same effect as it.
Right.
Like whetstone,
like
or whetstone
behind us here.
Yeah. Like whetstone, you burn it and it essentially creates strong gusts of wind that catch the sails, and they can like move a lot faster. Whereas Mephi can blow into the sail and have the same effect.
Right.
To a certain extent. So yeah, what sank Deerhead Island? I think either something to do with the Whetstone mine or the appearance of Mephizeleu.
Which is just a great name, by the way.
Yeah, so good.
And he's named after like a great sea serpent.
Yeah, a sea serpent legend.
Yeah, reminded me of like Jormungandr.
Yeah.
Yeah, super cool. And like I don't know what I imagined Mephi, and then I saw art online. Like while I was reading the book, I always look up like, oh, fan art of blah blah blah. Like I don't know if for people watching, you can see behind me, just adorable. The author herself has put out images of what Mephi looks like.
Okay,
super cute.
The whole time I was honestly picturing Momo essentially with webbed feet, like just like awesome. A type of like a monkey sort of like, but even though he describes it sort of like more like cat-like at the start,
it's like a cat-like otter, with horns type of thing.
Yeah, it's a really cool creature design too. And as Mephi grows older, he's growing like the beard hairs and like the horns are coming out. And then we saw the female adult version, or you said the name, I heard Thrana, yeah. So Thrana has like curled horns,
right?
So I guess Mephi might get curled horns too.
Cool.
But yeah, no, that's a cool creature. And like the bond, like the Mephi's bond with Jovis slowly growing is like, that was one of my favorite. Like
I loved it. And like I think his name is I'll just look at it. I think it's Fyodor. Fyodor Chin, who's the narrator for the Jovis sections of the book. So also gets to voice Mephi.
Yeah.
And just that voice, like, not good. It's so good. I love it. The look and description of that type of being, Thrana and Mephi, whatever they're called, reminds me of sort of like the Volpertingers from like I think it's maybe like a Scandinavian folklore, and like German folklore, what they call jackalopes as well, like the sort of horned rabbit small creature things. Definitely reminds me of that. One of the things I noticed, like, and I think you would only get this from the audio book, but I think it's Natalie Naudus. There's two women, obviously, one who does Falu and I think Renami sections of the book. And I think that's Emily Woo Zeller, and then Natalie Naudus I think does Lynn, but also whichever one does Lynn, I think it's Natalie, also does Sand. So there's another like through line, and she does like a subtle change to the voice where Sand obviously sounds a little bit older, but it's done so well that it's like, oh, like they're just using, and I don't know, like I picked up on it when I was reading, but I didn't think about it. I was like, oh, this is sort of like a minor character. There's not many chapters that have Sand, so they probably weren't going to go out and get a fourth voice actor to do this. And then that's sort of all coming together, being like, nope, there's a reason. It's so good.
And another thing that made me super curious, honestly, what I have to say about this book, it sets up a lot of very interesting mysteries. And maybe the reason I'm saying 8 out of 10 was because I like to hear what the results are. So like for me, this is like a phenomenal setup for a series. Just like it's like I'm ready for book 2 like immediately. By the way, it's coming out in like a month and a half, I think.
That'll be our December rumination for sure. I'm super excited.
So the thing, it was the last thing that Jovis said in the entire book, I think, that he noticed that Lynn's eyes were essentially the same as Amala's.
Which
is like which is like, it just adds like, what were the experiments? Like, what was the Emperor doing? Like, did he create, like, is Lin made from parts of Amala too?
Right.
Like,
He said, as Lynn nodded and she placed the medallion over my neck, I realized what had been bothering me. Her eyes looked just like Amala's.
Yeah.
And this is sort of after the fact that he's resigned to never finding her again.
Yeah. Resigned to the fact that she's dead.
Yeah. There's parts of this book where he sort of comes to terms with it.
Mhm.
And then something will give him hope again.
Yeah.
And he goes, oh, hope is dangerous. And then, but he's still, you know, he has to chase down any sort of hope that there is. And then this part was like the definitive, you know?
Mhm.
And yeah, just like the Emperor taking these people and using their bodies for parts and making a disgusting construct with different people's body parts. It's so gross.
It's horrifying. But then then I have more questions about even the magic system, because we know that if a person whose shard is in a construct dies, that shard no longer works.
Right.
And we've seen just from like Ilith, for example, the construct of spies, she in her weird spider body with hands, so gross.
And the grandmother's face thing.
Yeah. So uncomfortable, just the worst. Like she had like multiple clusters of multiple shards in her body.
Right.
And she's nowhere near as complex as Lin and Bayun were, let alone all the people on Mila, who are all presumably constructs.
Right.
Like, how many shards does Lin have in her, for example? And like how would it be, like, how could you even create free will? Like, that's pure AI. Like, that is like the idea of artificial intelligence.
Right.
Whereas she's shown the capacity to grow. And she's even proven that normal constructs can change their behaviors based on a little spy construct that she tamed early on. And like, it saved her at the climax of the story, even though she had never given it an order. It just dropped down like the critical moment and saved her from a war construct. So just like, I have so many questions, which is, I think, a great thing for a first book to do.
Totally. That sort of, now I'm thinking like you're saying, all the people who's, well, actually, yeah, I guess when you just brought that up, I was like, yeah, if he's killing these people and splitting their bodies into parts to make them, their bone shards are useless.
Mm-hmm.
But he's probably not using theirs, he's probably using other people's. But I'm wondering if the fact that Thrawn's there has some sort of like, if Mephi's able to give powers to Jovis that allow him to do the things he was doing, what would that look like if you put that power into a construct? Or if you took bone shards from a creature like that and put it into a construct like Lin or Bayun, is that the reason why there's enhanced magic or more complicated algorithms being able to be inside of those constructs? Like, I'm wondering if that has something to do with it too, because I believe Lin describes finding Thrawn as she looks very, very bad and needs her wounds tended to and stuff like that.
Yeah, she has multiple tubes coming out of her body.
Right.
For me, after that, well, there's the other thing, that there's a fully formed body of the Emperor also. Like, that's an important thing that she didn't touch. Like, it's still in the lab down there.
Right.
And she didn't want to take it out of the like liquid because she didn't know if it would awaken once she took it out. Which is an interesting question for book 2. But my read on it was that the Emperor was keeping Thrawn there for her healing abilities, because we've seen Jovis heal very quickly in his bond with Mephi. So my theory was that he was using her ability to regenerate flesh in order to grow the people.
Oh, like how Bayun said earlier, yeah.
Because we know that Bayun and every single copy of him was created from the Emperor's own flesh. And that's hinted at because he says to Lin, once she realized, or before she realizes she's a construct, I believe it happened, like that conversation where he tells her like it was too late to like get his wife back. Like, once he knew what he had to do, it was already too late, and he burned her body and like sent her soul to the afterlife. Whereas it wasn't too late for him, so he's been using his own flesh to create copies of himself. He's
been like, taking parts of his body off and then regenerating them via Thrawn.
Yeah, and then we know that he's missing his toes.
Oh,
like
yes,
that's
right.
an early reveal where like he doesn't have parts of his feet, and she asks him, and he like brushes her off every time she mentions the fact that he like doesn't have toes. So Lin is not actually a direct copy of the late Empress, as Bayan is a copy of the Emperor.
Right. Yeah, so I guess like over time you could make a whole clone of yourself the way he has, like that body that's in there, like you're saying. Yeah, that's fucking scary.
So it's like what is in that body, like what memories in the we had never even seen the memory machine,
right?
Or did we see it like briefly? Like she might have. It was like that whole like the finale, the final climax chapters were like such a quick. Like she gets into the lab, saves, oh my god, the Mephi and Thrana,
yeah.
And like she runs into Jovis in the palace, who also has Mephi.
Yeah, another one of those point of view shifts.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, which was really cool to see always.
It was, yeah. And I liked hearing Jovis from Lin's perspective. Like that's what I was talking about when I said the narrator doing the other voice of the other character, where we had the Lin narrator narrating Jovis's lines, which was like I guess you can't just like put the other narrator. Anyway, that was just like a cool thing you could do with an audiobook with multiple narrators.
Yeah.
Wow. What else?
Like I look forward to later on. I don't know if I'll get a chance before we do the sequel, but I always like, again, I've been buying the books we review, even if I read them on Audible or listen to them on Audible or read them. I like to have both, because I don't think in my head I would have been able to create the same sort of experience as I did have like listening to it. Yeah. Just the point of views are done so well and hammers home like how different these people actually are. Whereas I feel like in my head, I would just like gray matter them all together type of thing. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, the audiobook was very, very well done. It honestly adds a lot to the experience of hearing the story, just having that different perspective.
Yeah, and as I can see here on Audible, it comes out on the 9th of November, and it does have the same 3 narrators back on board. So nice. Super excited for that too.
There's just so much. Like, honestly, this book was just answered almost 0 questions and just posed so many new ones. It's like now I need to read that. Like, it's just a great, like a very, very well done opening to a series. Just like I have no idea. Like, I thought even to the end, I thought that Sand might actually be the like actual living Empress.
Oh wow!
Like,
okay.
Until like almost till the end, because I was like, she has the memories that like the Empress would have,
right?
And then I'm like, what was the goal? Like, why create so many? And like, what are they gonna do now? Like, because they at the end of the book, Sand and her group got on the boat and started going southwest, which is presumably to Imperial, and they say that
they're building an army.
Building an army, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering about that as well. Obviously, there's the idea of just having his failures somewhere where he can access them if he needs reference, but also just strange that he wouldn't just deconstruct them, excuse me, and use their bone shards in a different way. I wonder what the idea was behind, or maybe the people who are on Mila are, well, okay, if Lin doesn't work out, then we'll grab Sand, and Sand will be the next, and we'll plug her into the memory machine type of thing. But they all seemingly, at least Sand did, have the memories of the Empress already.
Yeah. The way I read it was so what we know is the blue sailed boat goes from whatever location it's at to Imperial and then to Mila.
Right.
So I think that it's Emperor is taking people, experimenting on them. Once he creates a new construct, if it fails, sends it to Mila. Right. But then like, why? Because in Mila, all they did was pick mangoes.
Yeah. He would have had to go in, like after it had failed, he'd have to go in and recode their bone shards so that they fell in line with the rest of the village on Mila.
Exactly.
Which is just super strange.
And then why leave all those bone shards in use?
My one other theory is that like with her clear head, Sands, that is, that sentence at the end of the book, we're building an army, might not be Sand saying it. That might still be sort of injected memories from the Empress of the Emperor trying to build an army of human constructs.
Maybe. See, the reason I don't think that was it, because there's that moment where they're all jolted on Mila. Where they all remember, and that's the moment the Emperor died, where like his commands over the shards was lifted.
Very true, yeah.
Which is another thing that I was confused about.
But there's always that sort of, if this happens, then default to blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And so they may be defaulting to Sand, who's the, I don't know, maybe the next up in command. I don't know. But it would be to somebody. In a lot of the constructs, it would go default to Lin or default to successor or whatever the case was. So I'm wondering if those constructs, do they now have nobody to default to? Was that not programmed in?
Plus they're so complex that it's like maybe he's created almost essentially like free will in them, and like somehow found a way to lower the use rate of the shards. Because I mean, if you think about how many shards would be needed for such a complex construct, like that'd be thousands and thousands of people being shard sick, which maybe is exactly what is happening. We don't know. I
don't think he has that sort of moral compass to.
I don't think so either. There's no reason to believe it, but then it's like, why not just reuse those shards like he could? Like, why go through the effort of creating those forearm constructs to take them to Mila and to keep them there? Like,
terrifying, by the way.
Yeah, super scary. And then I think there was even like the forearm constructs didn't stop working after the Emperor died, because the one that Jovis fought, that fight happened post I thought was post the death of the Emperor.
Yeah, it definitely is, because he fights him and then jumps over the wall, or he jumps over the wall to fight him, right?
Yeah.
And then the one, they capture the one on the beach on Mila, but they don't kill him until after everyone's been jolted, as far as I remember.
Well, once everyone's jolted, she says we're going to kill him, and that's when they realize they can, like, that's when she realizes she can like think of violence again.
Right.
So if that one's still alive, then like it's not being, and then it's like, what happens to all the constructs that are on all the other islands that were being controlled by the Emperor? Like, there's just so many things.
Utter chaos right now.
And then there's like the whole, we barely touched on like Falu, and they're part of the main rebellion, the Shardless Few, led by Geo, pretty cool character, who have just taken over, like successfully ran a coup on Falu's island. And
Nephalanu, right?
Yes. Yeah. So with an N, definitely. Nephalanu. Yeah, I think so. So now she's the governor of that island, but we know that like that whole situation's tense because Geo wanted to kill her.
Yes. Which it was awesome point of view from Jovis.
Yeah.
Figuring that out, and then
I loved the Jovis Geo sort of interaction.
Yeah.
Where you have like Renami, like the very idyllic, like believes wholeheartedly in the good for the people, and the rebellion is good for the people. And then you have Jovis, who has seen enough of the world to see her naivety and the fact that she's being used by somebody who he sees himself in, like another liar. Like but also to contrast that, or compare that to, I should say, that of the Emperor, who would willingly sacrifice people in order to protect other people and the Empire from the potential return of the Alonga. But then you see, like in Geo and in the Emperor, like not so different. Like you're willing to kill Falu because it fits your purpose. Yeah, it's just on a smaller scale. And I think Jovis says something to that effect too. Like, if you do this, like, you're not really any better than the people you're trying to dethrone, type of thing. Which I think is always interesting to, like, people who get into things with good intentions can often, that cycle comes back around, and now, you're the very thing you said you would destroy, Anakin Skywalker style. Yep.
I want to go back to the book covers. So I'm taking a look at both Bone Shard Daughter, which obviously has the very clear key you can see here on the cover, but then has things like, a little Mephi is sort of in the key. We can obviously see the buildings behind, and then these waves sort of crashing over, and boats on the sea and stuff like that. So obviously reminiscent of what happened at Deerhead. the Empire in general, and obviously the Keys and Mephi playing a big part in the story. So then taking that into consideration and looking at the cover of the Bone Shard Emperor, the sequel, we see those same waves, but then we see 2 crossed swords and 2 crossed sea serpents.
Yes.
Again, references to the sea serpents were made in the naming of Mephi. What was the name of the Mephisalu, right? So I'm wondering if those will actually play a part in the sequel, which I'd be very excited to see.
That is a great point. I never even like thought about, because I don't have the physical book. I never like looked at the covers like that. And I mean,
I know this because like this creature on it, it's like not quite a fish, but it sort of had whiskers and like a dog sort of snout type of thing. I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah, totally. Oh, and the fact that this series is called The Drowning Empire or Drowning Empire.
Yeah.
So presumably we'll see more sinking islands.
Right. Yeah, and I'm curious as to if that is some sort of not force of nature per se, but if that is the Ilonga strategically coming back and, you know, I don't know, maybe detonating these Whitstone mines, stuff like that. I'm curious to see. And yeah, I can't say better than you did before. This book set up so much that I need to know now.
Yeah.
And I'm glad it's only a 2-month wait for us to discover this book a little bit after it came out. Because that would sort of tear me apart if I had to wait any longer. But yeah. So yeah, I mean, we gave our scores before, but I mean, we'll say here again for the spoiler review, 1000% would recommend this book. I say this with every book we review and nearly every book I read. I would love to see this as like a live action series or movie. I think this one would be way better tailored to a series. Just because that journey of Jovis sort of, I think it's nice to have that play out and give it time to breathe type of thing. But yeah, any other recommendations for this book or any final thoughts you may have on it?
I have to say I was very, very happy with the magic system. I hope we dive a lot more into Bone Shard magic in the sequels. I think it's like a really, really interesting magic system, one that I have not exactly like that, but like a sort of program condition based magic system is something that I've thought of many times, like my own little writings.
Because you've designed websites and stuff like that, right?
Yep. Yeah, I have learned some programming, and I think just like I think it lends itself really, really well to magic. And I think that like it's a logical leap to make, like a magic system that would be like that. Like, I think there's like a lot you can do with that, runes and stuff like that. I mean, this is pretty much runes.
Yeah.
So I love the magic system. I really hope we dive further into it. There's so many mysteries. Like it's a must read for me. Like now the sequels, I will absolutely be finishing this trilogy probably by day one. Like,
yes, I've done it, everybody.
So yeah. Oh, and speaking of how you said a live action series, I think this actually lends itself very, very well to being adapted as a TV show, like a series, even just going chapter by chapter. Like, I think you could literally do it like.
Yeah, I'd say like 3 chapters in one. Like, I was sort of thinking of this while I was listening to it, where it's like an episode where you start with Lynn and Jovis and then Falu or Renami. And then some episodes you get a little bit of Sand in there too. And like those are only every 4 episodes type of thing. That'd be so cool. Yeah, that's all immediately where my mind goes when I'm reading. Like, what would it look like on screen? You know, like which studio should handle this one? But yeah, super excited. So yeah, masterclass stamp from the Lords of Lore here.
Yep.
Shout out to Andrea Stewart.
Also, I think this is a debut novel, I think.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is extremely impressive.
Yeah, that is a common theme on this show.
Yep.
If not debut, then self-published. Yeah. And another Orbit property. Orbit, if you're out there and listening, sponsor Ruminations, because we fuck with your people, man.
Yeah, we will read your books and give them reviews.
Yeah, we could almost go exclusive. Well, I mean, any other publishers out there too, we're also interested in reading your books. But yeah, no, Absolutely fantastic. So for people, if they want to see more of our reviews, again, we've done the Rage of Dragons, the Fires of Vengeance, the Sword of Kaigen, and now the Bone Shard Daughter. So you can check those all out on the channel. Again, we have a show every Tuesday where we dive deep into a fantasy or sci-fi topic. And then we do some interviews here and play a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons, that you can catch those on Fridays where this show doesn't come out. This show is once a month, so you can read along with us and then tune in for the review. Next month, we're actually be going to do Ninth House by, I think it's Leigh Bardugo, is how it's pronounced. And that's on your recommendation.
Yep.
And
that is another one.
Yeah.
That I bought based on the cover.
Yeah. Oh man, we got like, I'm telling you, man, I think we counted yesterday. My girlfriend and I over the last month have bought like 35 books.
You have a problem, man.
Yeah. It's and like I'm still like obviously subscribed to like audiobooks and everything too. So you gotta find time.
I'm there with you.
Yeah. But yeah, so the next book will, and that's an interesting one because unlike the properties we've reviewed before, that's one neither of us has read yet. Yep. So that'll be interesting for sure. So yeah, if you want to read along with us and catch us here next month on Lords of Lore Ruminations, as always, I'm Matt.
I'm Luka.
And we are the Lords of Lore.